The twin suns of the planet Navara hung low in the sky, casting long, golden shadows across the jagged rocks. The wind was harsh, whipping fine sand and dust across the barren landscape. Captain Alara Vin's ship, the Star Seeker, lay in ruins among the rocks. Its hull was cracked, panels torn away, and smoke still rose from the engines. She had survived a violent solar storm that no one had predicted, but the storm had left her stranded on this remote world. Alara climbed slowly from the wreckage, her boots crunching against the sharp stones. Every movement sent a pang of pain through her body. She had a small cut on her forehead, and her right arm ached from a bad landing. Yet, despite the exhaustion, her mind was alert. Survival depended on her focus. She scanned the area with sharp eyes, noting the shadows between the rocks where small creatures scuttled and the strange, metallic glint of minerals embedded in the cliffs. She knew she had limited time. The suns would set soon, and the temperature here dropped quickly once darkness fell. The night on Navara could freeze a human alive within minutes. She needed shelter, warmth, and safety for the night. Carefully, she made her way to the ship's remains, searching for anything that could help. Broken panels provided bits of metal she could use to patch openings. Loose wires and circuits could be used to create a small generator. Alara worked quietly, setting up a temporary camp next to the wreck. She found a small storage locker with rations and water packs. Even though she was tempted to rest immediately, she forced herself to check the perimeter. The storm might have driven off larger predators, but scavengers were always around. She could not take the chance of being caught off guard. Far above the planet's surface, shadows moved. A figure crouched along a ridge, hidden from sight. Dax, a rogue scavenger who had made a living picking off stranded explorers, had been tracking the Starseeker for days. He knew humans were resourceful, but he believed he could outsmart one who was injured and alone. He studied the wrecked ship carefully. The panels were torn, the hull broken, and the lights flickered weakly. Valuable tech was scattered around, and the chance to collect it was too tempting to resist. Dax waited until the suns were low, just before the long night set in. He moved silently, his boots making almost no sound against the rocks. His eyes gleamed as he approached the wreck. "Easy pickings," he muttered under his breath. He did not see the small, nearly invisible sensors Alara had set up. He did not hear the faint hum of energy running through the ship's partially operational systems. Inside the Star Seeker, Alara finally allowed herself a moment of rest. She lay on a makeshift bed of panels and blankets she had gathered, closing her eyes to regain her strength. Even in sleep, her mind remained partly alert. Years of training as an explorer and warrior had taught her that danger could appear when least expected. She had survived crashes, storms, and hostile creatures on multiple worlds, and she knew the importance of preparation. The night on Navara arrived quickly. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the world bathed in deep blues and purples. The temperature fell sharply, and the wind began to howl through the rocky valleys. Alara's small campfire cast flickering shadows across the wreck. She drifted into a light sleep, her breathing slow and even, but her hand never strayed far from the hidden hilt of her plasma blade. Dax crept closer, his eyes on the scattered tech. He didn't notice the faint hum that grew louder as he approached the ship. He lifted a panel, planning to pry it open, when a thin line of light flashed across his eyes. In that instant, he saw a shadow move where there should have been none. Alara's ship had an old, but still functional, defense system. It was a precaution she had installed herself, knowing that stranded explorers often attracted thieves. The system had a simple yet deadly design. Any unauthorized movement near critical parts of the ship would trigger the deployment of her plasma blade. The blade hovered silently, suspended by magnetic fields, glowing faintly with energy. It was calibrated to react faster than any human could, and Dax had unknowingly stepped into its range. The moment Dax reached for the tech, the blade moved. It did not scream, it did not shout, it simply acted. It sliced through the air with precision, knocking the scavenger off balance. Dax stumbled backward, startled. His eyes wide as the truth hit him. The human he thought was unconscious had prepared for this moment in ways he could not have imagined. He tried to grab a panel to shield himself, but the blade was too fast. It knocked the metal aside and hovered near him again, ready for another strike. Dax realized that this was no ordinary human. This was a trained warrior, someone who had faced dangers far beyond the ordinary. Panic filled him, but he tried to remain calm, backing away slowly. Inside the ship, Elara stirred. She sensed the disturbance through the subtle vibrations in the floor, something she had trained herself to notice over the years. She opened her eyes slowly, taking in the scene. The faint glow of her blade moved outside, tracking an intruder. She did not need to stand. Her presence, her ship, and her preparation were enough to control the situation. Dax tried one final move, reaching for a piece of tech that might serve as a weapon. But before he could act, the blade hovered directly in front of him. Its edge shimmered with restrained energy, warning him. For a moment, he froze, recognizing the power of a human mind applied to technology. The humans were fragile, he thought, but their ingenuity was deadly. Elara spoke softly from inside the wreck. "Leave," she said. Her voice was calm, yet it carried authority. Dax froze, realizing that she had not even stood up. The words alone were enough to make him reconsider. But greed clouded his judgment. He lunged forward, hoping to snatch a small energy pack from the wreck. The blade moved again, faster than Dax could react. It knocked the pack from his hands and forced him to stumble into a shallow ditch. He scrambled to his feet, heart pounding, sweat on his brow. He had underestimated her. And now, he faced the consequences. Elara watched carefully, analyzing his every movement. She knew that humans were not invincible, but they could survive where others failed because of preparation, patience, and skill. Dax might have thought he was clever, but he had underestimated the strength of human planning. The wind picked up, and the twin moons rose over the horizon. Shadows danced across the rocks, and the night on Navara seemed to close in around the two figures. Dax realized that escape would not be easy. He glanced at the ship and saw the faint glimmer of other defensive measures, traps, sensors, and alarms that Elara had silently installed. Every option seemed dangerous. Elara finally stood, her plasma blade in hand. She moved with quiet precision, every step measured, every movement calculated. Dax backed away slowly, realizing that fighting would only make things worse. He had no chance against someone who had turned even a crash landing into an advantage. "You will not take anything from this ship," Elara said. Her voice was firm, and the blade's hum grew louder, as if echoing her words. He swallowed hard, understanding that humans were more than just fragile bodies. They were cunning, resilient, and capable of turning even disadvantage into strength. For the first time, Dax felt true fear. Not of death, but of being outsmarted, outprepared, and outmatched. He took a step back, then another, slowly retreating into the shadows of the night. Elara watched him go, her eyes never leaving the intruder until he vanished from sight. The night returned to silence, with only the wind and the distant cries of alien creatures breaking the calm. Elara returned to her makeshift bed, her mind already planning repairs for the ship. She would survive the night, and tomorrow she would start rebuilding. The humans had faced countless dangers across the galaxy, and this storm, this rogue scavenger, and this alien world were just another challenge to overcome. As she closed her eyes again, the faint hum of her blade continued in the background, a reminder that human skill, courage, and foresight were always ready, even when sleep came. The planet was harsh, the odds were against her, but Elara Vin was human, and humans never gave up. The twin moons of Navara had climbed higher in the sky, painting the rocky landscape with silver and blue light. The wind still howled, and the temperature had dropped sharply. Captain Elara Vin remained awake, seated by the small fire she had managed to keep alive, sharpening her plasma blade. Though the weapon was mostly symbolic, it also served as a reminder of her vigilance. The night was long, and she knew the scavenger could return, or worse, others could be attracted by the wreck of her ship. She listened carefully to the sounds of the planet. The rocks whispered with the wind, and distant creatures called to one another. She could hear the faint scratching of scavengers moving in the shadows. Her instincts were sharp. She knew that her survival depended not only on her skill but also on her understanding of the environment. Navarra was hostile, but it was predictable to those who paid attention. Dax had retreated, but he was not gone. Hidden behind a ridge several meters away, he watched the fire flicker against the rocks and the silhouette of the Starseeker. He had never faced a human like Elara before. He had expected a weak, frightened explorer. But instead, he had seen precision, control, and a calm that unnerved him. He muttered under his breath, frustration creeping into his voice. How can one human be so prepared? His eyes scanned the shadows. He was pleating creep scans in the visitive. Of 1-7 this way. Of 1B7 this way. He was not one. There must be more than one. Maybe traps, sensors. She knew I would come. Dax was not foolish. He knew that humans were clever, and he had underestimated her. That was a mistake he could not repeat. Dax began to move quietly along the rocks, circling the wrecked ship in search of another way to reach it. He needed supplies, tech, anything he could sell for a good price. But he was aware now that one wrong move could cost him dearly. He had seen the blade in action. The human had prepared for him, even while asleep. That thought stayed in his mind, creating doubt. But greed and desperation pushed him forward. Inside the ship, Elara rose from her temporary bedding. She had slept lightly, and though her body still ached, her mind was alert. She walked slowly through the wreck, examining the panels and controls that were still functioning. The storm had damaged most of the ship's systems, but she had salvaged enough energy cells to keep her defensive systems partially online. Her ship had a small, automated defense module, built for situations like this. It included motion-sensitive blades, energy sensors, and a low-frequency alarm system. She had designed it to deter scavengers without causing permanent harm unless necessary. It was silent, precise, and deadly in skillful hands. Elara crouched beside the control panel and activated the motion sensors. A faint hum filled the ship. She could feel the energy running through the circuits. Though Dax had retreated for the moment, she knew he would not give up easily. Humans survived by planning for situations far beyond the ordinary, and she was no exception. Outside, Dax crept closer, moving from shadow to shadow. He glanced at the distant moons and the pale light reflecting off jagged rocks. He had watched her sleep, waited for an opening. But the human had been ready in ways he could not see. His mind raced for a solution. If he could reach the storage bay without triggering the defense systems, he could escape with valuable tech. Elara's sensors registered movement. The blade, still inactive physically, hummed with energy, ready to spring into action. Elara remained calm, watching the faint readouts on the console. She could see the rogue moving in the perimeter, and she had time to anticipate his actions. She did not need to confront him directly. The system would handle the first contact. Dax reached the edge of the ship and paused. He crouched low, examining the shadows for signs of traps. He noticed faint lines on the ground, almost invisible in the moonlight. "What is this?" he whispered. For the first time, he felt genuine fear. Humans, he realized, were not weak. Their intelligence and foresight gave them advantages that brute strength could not match. He took a careful step, then another. A faint shimmer in the air caught his eye. The blade moved silently, hovering near a damaged hull panel. Dax froze, realizing that this was no ordinary defense. It was almost alive, responding to his movement. His hands shook slightly as he reached for a loose panel, thinking he could pry it off and escape with some supplies. The blade reacted instantly. It moved in a smooth arc, intercepting Dax's hand and knocking the panel away. He stumbled back, clutching his arm. The sound of metal scraping against metal echoed in the still night. He glared at the ship, frustration boiling inside him. He had never been challenged like this. Every step forward seemed to trigger another defense, and he had no idea what else awaited him. Ilara spoke from inside the ship, her voice calm but firm. "Step away, or you will be forced to leave empty-handed." Dax flinched at the sound. He could not see her, yet her presence was undeniable. It was not fear of a human body that made him hesitate. It was the knowledge that humans could outthink almost any opponent. He tried again, this time moving more slowly, avoiding obvious triggers. He reached for a small crate near the hull. As soon as his fingers touched it, the blade moved like a shadow. It knocked the crate away, then hovered close to him, cutting the air in a warning. Dax's eyes widened. He realized that the ship was alive, in a sense responsive, aware, and ready to protect its owner. "Impossible," he muttered. He had faced traps before, but never one so subtle, so effective. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. He needed a plan, but every option seemed risky. If he stayed, he might be caught or injured. If he retreated, he would leave without supplies and lose credibility among other scavengers. Ilara watched carefully. She had anticipated this reaction. The rogue would try to find a way in, but human preparation and intelligence always provided an advantage. She had survived countless worlds, hostile environments, and predators that thought humans were weak. Every instinct told her that Dax could not match her foresight. The night continued, the moons casting eerie shadows across the rocks. Dax circled the ship slowly, looking for blind spots. He tried to distract the blade by throwing a rock toward another area. The blade moved instantly, intercepting it. He cursed under his breath. The ship and its systems were coordinated, and it seemed almost as if the human inside controlled it with thought alone. Finally, Dax realized the truth. He could not outsmart her. She had anticipated his every move. Humans survived because they prepared, adapted, and used intelligence in ways that others often overlooked. He had underestimated her. Every stolen ship he had taken before this one had been unprotected, but this human was different. He stepped back into the shadows, breathing heavily. He had failed tonight, but he had learned a valuable lesson. Humans were not fragile, weak, or easy to outsmart. Their skill, courage, and foresight made them dangerous opponents, even when they appeared unconscious or alone. Ilara deactivated the motion sensors temporarily, allowing herself a moment to rest. She had proven her point. The rogue would not dare return tonight. And she had gained valuable information about the terrain and the effectiveness of her systems. She was not only a survivor, but a strategist. Every step she had taken, every precaution she had implemented, was a testament to human ingenuity and courage. She looked at the moons, thinking about the journey ahead. The storm had damaged her ship severely, but she would repair it. The planet was harsh, and dangers lurked everywhere, but humans had survived far worse. She had survived crashes, hostile worlds, and creatures that were stronger and faster than humans. What set humans apart was not their strength, but their intelligence, resilience, and courage in the face of adversity. Dax, hiding in the shadows, looked back one last time at the flickering light of the fire and the faint glow from the Star Seeker. He understood that tonight he had been outmatched. Humans were clever, adaptable, and capable of turning even disadvantage into advantage. He would retreat, But he would never forget this lesson. Inside the ship, Ilara settled back into her temporary bed. Her plasma blade hovered quietly beside her, energy still faintly glowing. The night was long, but she was ready. Humans survived because they thought ahead, planned, and acted with precision. She closed her eyes, not in fear or exhaustion, but in confidence. She had won the first battle. Outside, the planet remained quiet, save for the distant cries of nocturnal creatures. The twin moons glimmered above, and the wind whispered across the jagged rocks. Ilara Vin, human and survivor, rested for the night. Tomorrow, she would begin the next step of her journey. Repairing her ship, exploring the planet, and continuing to demonstrate the power of human ingenuity and courage. The rogue scavenger had learned his lesson. Humans were not easy targets. They survived. They adapted. They triumphed. And Ilara would prove that once again. The first light of dawn crept over the jagged horizon of Navarra, painting the rocky landscape in shades of gold and orange. The wind had calmed slightly from the violent gusts of the night before, leaving only a soft hum as it passed over the stones. Captain Ilara Vin had already risen. Her body ached from the crash, but her mind was sharp and ready. She had survived the night, and now it was time to act. Ilara had observed the rogue scavenger, Dax, from the shadows during the early hours. He had retreated into the rocky valleys, but she knew he had not abandoned his intentions. Humans were resilient, yes, but the galaxy was filled with those who underestimated them. Dax had learned the hard way that she was clever, but he would return if given the chance. And she could not afford to wait passively. She packed her essentials, ensuring the Starseeker's remains were secure. The ship could not fly yet, but she had salvaged enough energy to maintain life support and power her defensive systems. Her plasma blade hovered beside her, humming softly as if ready for action. Every movement she made was calculated. She was human, yes, but more than that, she was a survivor and a strategist. Dax moved cautiously through the rocky terrain, scanning for paths that would lead him back to the ship. He was frustrated, but determined. The previous night had taught him a lesson in human ingenuity, but greed and opportunity often pushed scavengers past caution. He was clever, or so he thought, and he believed he could find a way to steal at least part of the ship's valuable tech without being caught. Ilara, hidden behind a ridge of jagged stones, observed him silently. She had no intention of waiting for him to make another mistake. Humans survived by taking initiative, by thinking ahead, and by acting decisively. She noted Dax's pattern, his pauses, his cautious glances, and she began to plan. She would not confront him recklessly. She would use the environment, the ship, and her intelligence to her advantage. The rocky terrain of Navarra was unforgiving, but it was also a tool. Ilara studied the slopes and ridges, the shallow crevices, and the loose stones. She moved silently, her boots barely making a sound against the jagged surface. She positioned herself where she could strike if needed, but also where the planet itself could aid her. A sharp drop-off, a narrow path, or a loose boulder could all become part of her strategy. Dax reached the edge of the small canyon, where the Starseeker lay in ruins. His eyes darted around, looking for any sign of traps. But this time, he was cautious. He had learned that humans were clever, and he could not afford to underestimate one. He stepped carefully, avoiding the obvious sensors and monitoring the flickering shadows of the wreck. Ilara activated a small energy pulse from the ship. It was not harmful, but it sent a faint vibration through the rocks. Dax stopped in his tracks, scanning for the source. He could not see it, but he felt it, and it reminded him that he was being watched. Humans survived because they planned for contingencies far beyond what most creatures expected. She moved closer, staying hidden but ready to act. Her plasma blade hovered in front of her, its edge glowing faintly, as if sensing the rogue scavenger. The blade was not just a weapon. It was a symbol of preparation and foresight. Dax could see the subtle shimmer in the air, and felt a chill. He had encountered humans before, but never one who could control technology with such precision and calm. "Step away," Elara called softly, her voice carrying across the canyon. "You have no chance against me. Leave now, and you may survive." Dax froze, realizing that she was not bluffing. He had expected to catch her off guard, but she had anticipated his every move. Humans were clever, and she had proven it. Dax hesitated, torn between retreat and greed. He could see the wreck, the tech he desired, and the faint glow of the ship's defensive systems. His mind raced. If he left, he would lose the opportunity. If he stayed, he risked injury, or worse. Humans survived because they adapted, he reminded himself. But he had underestimated this one. Elara stepped into view, careful not to expose herself too early. She held her plasma blade steady, not as a threat, but as a warning. The rogue scavenger flinched at the sight of a human standing so calmly amidst the wreckage. Her presence alone was enough to demonstrate that humans were more than their physical strength. They were intelligent, resourceful, and capable of controlling situations others could not. Dax made a sudden move, lunging toward a small crate near the hull. He thought he had found a blind spot. The blade reacted instantly, slicing through the air with precision. It knocked the crate from his hands and forced him backward. He stumbled but recovered quickly, adrenaline pushing him forward. He realized that brute force alone would not work against her. Elara advanced carefully, using her knowledge of the terrain. Every step was calculated. She forced Dax into a narrow pass, where the cliffs loomed on either side. The rogue scavenger had few options. He could run, but the cliffs limited his movement. He could fight, but he had already seen the blade in action. Humans survived through intelligence, and she was proving it with every move. Dax tried to distract her by throwing a rock toward the edge of the canyon. The sound echoed loudly, but Elara did not flinch. She had anticipated such tactics. Her eyes followed the rogue's every movement, her mind calculating angles, distances, and possible outcomes. Humans survived because they thought ahead, and she had planned for this encounter from the moment she had observed him retreat. The blade hovered, ready to strike if needed. Dax realized that he had underestimated not just the human, but the technology she controlled. The ship was an extension of her will, a tool that amplified her skill. Humans survived because they could adapt and use every resource at their disposal. The rogue scavenger now faced the full measure of human ingenuity. "You cannot take anything from this ship," Elara said, her voice firm but calm. "Turn back now, and you may live to see another day." Dax's chest heaved as he considered her words. He had faced dangerous humans before, but none like her. She was patient, precise, and unyielding. Humans survived because they combined strength, intelligence, and courage, and she embodied all three. He made one last attempt, lunging toward a damaged panel he thought he could pry open. The blade moved instantly, intercepting his hand and knocking him to the ground. He scrambled to his feet, realizing that force alone would not win. He had underestimated the human spirit, the ability to plan, adapt, and act with precision. Elara stepped forward, closing the distance between them. She did not raise her blade aggressively, but held it ready, a clear warning. Dax could see now that escape was not possible. He had learned his lesson the hard way. Humans were not to be underestimated. They survived because they thought ahead, adapted quickly, and acted decisively. "You see now," Elara said softly, "that humans survive because we plan, because we act, and because we do not give up. You are not stronger, but you may be clever. That is not enough here." Dax swallowed, understanding the truth in her words. He had been outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outprepared. Humans were extraordinary in ways he had ignored. The rogue scavenger stepped back slowly, his mind racing for options. But there were none. The terrain, the ship, the blade, and the human, all of them worked together against him. Humans survived because they could turn even disadvantage into advantage. Dax realized he had been foolish to challenge her. Elara allowed him a chance to retreat. She did not need to attack further. Humans survived, not only through strength, but also through wisdom and restraint. She would demonstrate courage, but she would not harm unnecessarily. Dax stepped back into the shadows, his respect for humans growing with each step. He had been taught a lesson in the harshest way possible, and he would remember it. Elara turned back to her ship, assessing the damage. The encounter had shown her that humans could overcome not just the dangers of the galaxy, but also the greed and cunning of others. She began planning repairs, thinking about the resources she could salvage from the wreck. Humans survived because they were adaptable, resilient, and always ready to turn challenges into opportunities. The morning sun rose higher, casting long beams of light across the rocks. The wind carried the sounds of distant creatures, but the threat of the rogue scavenger had passed, for now. Elara knew that others might come, but she was ready. Humans survived by preparing, by learning, and by acting decisively. And she had proven that, once again. Her plasma blade returned to its resting position, energy still faintly glowing. She climbed into the Star Seeker, checking the life support systems and preparing to salvage what she could. The rogue scavenger had been defeated, but the journey was far from over. Humans survived, adapted, and thrived, even in worlds that seemed determined to break them. Elara Vin looked out at the rocky expanse of Navara. She had survived the night, bested the rogue, and protected her ship. She would continue her journey, repair her craft, and explore the galaxy. Humans survived because they were clever, resourceful, and brave. She would continue to prove that wherever danger lurked, humans could face it and prevail. The twin suns of Navara had fully risen, spreading warm light across the jagged terrain. The storm from the previous days had vanished, leaving behind a landscape both harsh and beautiful. Captain Elara Vin surveyed the wreck of her ship, the Star Seeker, from a small ridge. Though battered and scarred, the vessel was salvageable. Her body still ached, but her mind was sharp. Humans survived because they adapted, planned, and persevered. Today would be no exception. She descended carefully to the wreck, her plasma blade secured at her side. Every step was deliberate. The rogue scavenger, Dax, had disappeared into the rocks the night before, but she knew that others might notice the wreck and come seeking the same valuable technology. Preparation was key. Humans survived by staying one step ahead. Elara began by inspecting the hull. Panels were torn away, and the engines were severely damaged, but she had salvaged enough materials from the ship's storage to begin repairs. She connected energy cells to the partially operational systems and activated auxiliary circuits. The ship hummed faintly, a comforting sound that reminded her of the resilience humans carried within themselves. As she worked, her mind analyzed the events of the previous night. The rogue scavenger had tested her, and she had prevailed, not through brute strength alone, but through intelligence, preparation, and foresight. Humans survived because they could turn even dire circumstances into advantages. Every move she had made was precise, every precaution deliberate. The rogue had learned this lesson, but she would make sure it was a lesson others would never forget. Hours passed as Elara repaired systems, patching the hull with salvaged metal and rerouting power through the damaged circuits. Her plasma blade hovered nearby, ready to react to any unexpected movement. Even as she worked, she remained vigilant. Humans survived because they remained aware, even when exhaustion pressed against them. She would not allow complacency to endanger her now. Suddenly, A faint shimmer in the distance caught her attention. Shadows moved across the rocks, small figures approaching cautiously. Elara paused, analyzing their movement. Scavengers. She had expected them, and she had planned for them. Humans survived because they anticipated danger and acted decisively. She activated a series of energy pulses that created illusions of movement around the ship. Lights flickered in patterns, shadows shifted across the wreck, and sensors emitted subtle warnings. The approaching scavengers paused, unsure of what they were seeing. Human ingenuity had always relied on the ability to manipulate perception, and Elara had mastered it. One of the scavengers attempted to step closer, but the energy pulses forced him back. The group muttered among themselves, their confidence shaken. Humans survived because they could outthink their opponents, using strategy rather than relying solely on strength. Elara's calm and calculated presence ensured that her ship remained secure. Once the immediate threat had been deterred, Elara returned to her repairs. She focused on the engines, carefully reconnecting circuits and replacing damaged conduits. Each adjustment brought the ship closer to operational readiness. Humans survived because they were persistent, capable of maintaining focus under pressure. The galaxy was unforgiving, but her determination matched its challenges. As the day wore on, the Starseeker hummed steadily. The engines were functional, though not yet at full capacity. The hull was reinforced, and energy shields were partially operational. She tested the plasma blade, ensuring it remained responsive to unauthorized movements. Humans survived because they adapted, and her ship now reflected that resilience. Elara paused to rest briefly, her body weary but her mind alert. She considered the rogue scavenger and the lessons of the past day. Humans survived not only through preparation but through moral strength. She had incapacitated the intruder without causing permanent harm. Strength without wisdom was meaningless. Humans endured because they combined both. The scavengers in the distance had retreated, wary of the traps and the illusions she had created. Humans survived because they used intelligence to avoid unnecessary confrontation. Elara had proven that even a single human could protect valuable resources and maintain safety through foresight and skill. With the immediate threats neutralized, she began final preparations to leave the planet. Energy levels were stable, and the life support systems were fully functional. The engines purred as she ran diagnostics, and the navigation systems came online. Humans survived because they were problem solvers, able to repair and rebuild even in hostile environments. Elara climbed into the pilot seat, feeling the familiar weight of responsibility and control. She activated the main systems, running checks on the hull integrity and power distribution. The ship responded flawlessly, a testament to her skill and determination. Humans survived because they persisted in the face of adversity, and her actions embodied that resilience. From the cockpit, she could see the jagged landscape stretching into the distance. The storm-scarred rocks, the shifting shadows, and the silent peaks reminded her of the challenges she had faced. Humans survived because they did not merely endure. They thrived in conditions others would find unbearable. She was ready to leave Navara behind, stronger and wiser for the experience. As the ship lifted from the rocky surface, the twin suns glinted off the reinforced hull. Elara guided the Starseeker smoothly through the atmosphere, her movements precise and confident. Humans survived because they combined skill, intelligence, and courage. And her journey through Navara had demonstrated all three. She reflected on the rogue scavenger, Dax, and the encounter that had tested her. Humans survived, not through fear or aggression alone, but through the ability to plan, adapt, and act decisively. She had faced danger, protected her ship, and maintained moral strength throughout. Her triumph was not only a victory over an intruder, but a reaffirmation of human resilience. The engines roared as the ship cleared the atmosphere, leaving the harsh beauty of Navara behind. She set a course for the nearest human outpost, ready to report her findings and continue her exploration of the galaxy. Humans survived because they did not yield to obstacles, because they adapted and overcame challenges, and because they carried intelligence and courage in every action. Elara monitored the navigation systems, ensuring the ship maintained a stable course. She reviewed the damage reports and noted the repairs that would be needed once she reached a safe location. Humans survived because they thought ahead, anticipating potential problems and solving them before they became critical. Her success on Nivara was a testament to that mindset. She looked out the viewport at the distant planet, now shrinking behind her. Nivara had tested her, challenged her, and yet, she had prevailed. Humans survived because they persisted, and she was living proof. The rogue scavenger had underestimated her, but the galaxy had not broken her spirit. Her ship, though battered, carried her forward into the unknown, ready for whatever challenges awaited. As the Starseeker traveled through the void, Elara reflected on the lessons of her experience. Preparation, intelligence, and courage were not just traits, they were survival tools. Humans survived because they possessed these qualities in abundance. The galaxy was vast and filled with dangers, but she was confident in her abilities and in the strength of her species. Her plasma blade, resting safely at her side, served as a reminder of vigilance and readiness. Humans survived because they maintained focus, even when rest was necessary. The rogue scavenger and the challenges of Nivara had reinforced this principle. Elara smiled faintly, knowing that she had proven once again that humans could face danger, adapt, and triumph. Hours passed as the ship glided through space. The stars stretched endlessly around her, a tapestry of possibilities. Humans survived because they dreamed, explored, and acted boldly. She had survived Nivara not by chance but by skill, intelligence, and courage. The galaxy held countless dangers, but humans had always faced them and prevailed. Elara adjusted the ship's systems for optimal travel. Her sensors scanned the surrounding space, ensuring no unexpected threats approached. Humans survived because they combined vigilance with action, and she embodied that principle perfectly. Every decision she made reflected the resilience and ingenuity that defined her species. As she approached the distant human outpost, the familiar lights of the settlement came into view. She felt a sense of relief, not from fear, but from accomplishment. Humans survived because they completed their objectives, overcame challenges, and emerged stronger. Her journey through Nivara had tested her in every way, and she had met those tests with intelligence, courage, and skill. The Starseeker landed smoothly, its engines powering down with a satisfying hum. Elara climbed from the ship, taking in the familiar sights of human ingenuity and civilization. She had survived a harsh planet, outsmarted a rogue scavenger, and protected valuable technology. Humans survived because they combined skill, intelligence, and moral strength, and her actions had exemplified all three. As she reported her findings to the outpost leaders, she reflected on her journey. Humans survived because they prepared, adapted, and acted decisively. She had faced danger, mastered the environment, and protected her ship and its secrets. The galaxy would continue to challenge her, but she was ready. Humans survived because they were capable of greatness, and she had demonstrated that truth once again. Elara looked out at the stars, a sense of satisfaction filling her. The rogue scavenger, the storm, and the harsh terrain of Nivara had all tested her, but she had triumphed. Humans survived because they were clever, courageous, and relentless. The galaxy was vast, but she would continue to explore, repair, and adapt. Her story was one of human strength, resilience, and ingenuity. The Starseeker was repaired enough to continue its journey. Elara secured her equipment, checked the navigation systems, and set her sights on the next adventure. Humans survived because they persevered, and she had proven that in every action she had taken. As she lifted off, leaving Navara behind, Elara felt a renewed sense of confidence. Humans survived because they adapted, prepared, and acted decisively. Her journey had been difficult, but it had demonstrated the best qualities of her species. She would continue through the galaxy, facing dangers, solving problems, and thriving. Humans survived, and so would she. The twin suns of distant planets glimmered ahead, guiding her path. Elara Vin, human, explorer, and survivor, moved forward into the unknown. She had proven that humans could face danger, outthink their opponents, and overcome challenges. The galaxy was wide, and its dangers were many. But humans survived, and they thrived. And Captain Elara Vin would continue to prove it.